both sides, whether you're Republican, Democrat, left or right, everyone is so polarizing and causing this environment where it's hard to speak to each other and try to find that middle ground, because there is definitely middle ground there, but we allow these higher forces to sway us in a direction that we probably normally wouldn't sway.
It's going to take a very special individual or very divisive parties where the majority of the United States says, I'm sick and tired of this approach. I can't handle this black and white identity politics, the political violence. I can't handle this blame game that we're playing. Finally, a candidate has come out and they're just a normal person.
Medicine,
Law, friendship. This is Dr. Long and lawyer Nik. You're listening to the Medico-Legal Brief.
one doctor, one lawyer, and a whole lot of gray area. Welcome back, everyone, to the Medical Legal Brief here with Dr. Long and lawyer Nik. A lot has been going on in this last week with American politics and American news, and we wanted to do something that is a little bit more close to home, but also closer to those events rather than recording ahead of time and then posting it several weeks out.
Yeah.
So today's conversation is going to be a lot more unfiltered than our previous one. We try to keep it pretty real, no matter what topic we talk about, but this week is going to be a really interesting one. Right, Nick?
Yeah, it's been a really wild week in politics, like you said. And I think that in this podcast, medical and legal, we lean on like the crossroads and the intersection between the medical and legal, but it doesn't stop us from being able to talk about current events and even the view from a doctor and the view from a lawyer and what our opinions of those events are. It's going to be a pretty interesting conversation. And the great thing about our friendship, Long, is that you and I are able to have conversations, agree, disagree, and keep moving forward. I mean, we've been best friends forever. So if we weren't able to do that, we probably wouldn't be friends for as long as we have been.
Right. And I don't think we've ever had an argument or fight or debate that has actually led to anything substantial like what you would have with your girlfriend or your wife. I think we've always been able to come to an understanding, not necessarily convincing the other of our viewpoint, but at least understanding that there are different perspectives up there and it's okay to live with that.
Yeah. And I think you're hitting the nail on the head with that, where it's the understanding. You don't have to agree with somebody, but if you can just understand or put yourself in their shoes, it helps the conversation tenfold. It doesn't have to be so divisive at times if you agree or disagree.
Obviously, these days, everything's so political, politicized, and divisive, especially with this most recent event occurring last week with the Charlie Kirk assassination, and just how that has really just thrown both sides into weird frenzy to try to find blame and put blame where we just don't know where it should be yet, or maybe it's not even being put in the right places.
One thing to note about any sort of death, it gets made public really fast. Like I should say, a death of an individual who has such an influence, whether it's a political figure, whether it's an athlete, a celebrity, someone who is a political commentator, or even if it's just somebody who after the fact, like George Floyd, has garnered a lot of attention. With the state of the world and the state of our country, it's easy for people to want to identify with the side and be on the side of right. So you have one side that says, I'm right, I'm placing the blame on the other side. And the other side says, we're not wrong. It's not our fault. Here's why it's not our fault. And so then the two sides are just throwing bricks across each other and sometimes literally throwing bricks across each other, trying to place the blame because they identify so hard with one side or the other.
Right. I'm going to be pretty blunt, but I did not agree with very much of what Charlie Kirk espoused or told his followers, but I absolutely do not agree with political violence that has occurred from it. There was no reason for the assassination just because someone disagrees with you. And I think you would agree with that, Nik, whether you followed him, listened to him, agreed with him or not. What happened, just not the right way, not the way the U.S. is supposed to be. And it's a little sad to see that, and then how the reactions have been the days following the event.
I don't know if your social media blew up with everybody commenting on it, but from what I've seen, apparently a lot of people who have been outspoken about it, at least from a derogatory sense, have gotten a lot of backlash. I've seen instances where people have lost their jobs, or at least they're claiming, because you can never really 100,000% believe and vet what you see on social media. When people are posting on social media, a lot of times it's for clout. You're doing it for the gram. You're doing it for likes. You're doing it to have the voice and be seen and heard. When somebody comes on and they're bashing somebody over their death, and then all of a sudden they come on and say, I've just been fired from my job. Okay, is that a real thing? Or is that a fake thing? Did that actually happen? I'm seeing a lot of that on my feed and trying to discern what's accurate against what's not accurate. All of a sudden you're putting the phone down and saying, I just can't today. I can't go through my Twitter feed or my Facebook and keep seeing the replays of the commentary going back and forth.
Right, right. The other thing that is really frustrating is just seeing the hypocrisy in how everything has been managed with the news, with the politicians, with the administration, all of it. Both sides, whether you're Republican, Democrat, left or right, everyone, it's just so polarizing and causing this environment where it's just hard to speak to each other and try to find that middle ground, because there is definitely middle ground there, but we allow these higher forces to sway us in a direction that we probably normally wouldn't sway. But
Mhm.
because we want to follow the masses, currently, obviously, not only the administration, but the right is where the Republicans tend to be saying, hey, let's persecute hate speech more. Whereas back when cancel culture was occurring with the left, left was canceling everyone. They were angry about that. So it's just really funny, but really frustrating to see that both sides are just mirroring each other at different times.
Yeah, it's all about context and your own definition of something. So you talked about cancel culture, you talked about persecuting hate speech, so on and so forth, but then you also juxtapose that against freedom of speech. When you look at political violence, well, you're assassinating a political figure. It's political violence. Or I guess in this case, Charlie Kirk is a political commentator. He wasn't
Mhm.
actually a politician, but we're chalking up to political violence. But in some instance, if we said, hey, we're going to go assassinate a leader of another country because of A, B, and C, and we were able to find cause for that, that by definition could also be political violence. So each side will define it in a manner that fits their position and again, makes them right as opposed to makes them wrong. How do you lay out your argument to where definitionally it may be exactly that, but the act itself is something different, something that's more
Mhm.
acceptable? Because if you go
Mhm.
back, well, you could claim that if you really wanted to start throwing definitions, was the Revolutionary War, was that, acts of political violence? Well, it led to our United States American freedom. So where does that end? And then you go back into the history of what our government's influence in other countries have been over the course of the last 100 or so years. Have we engaged ourselves as a country, as a government, in political violence? So where do you draw that line? How do you justify it? How do you how do you how do you work around that and juxtapose that against where we currently at and get past the hypocrisy that we seemingly look at and kind of know exists?
That's the issue, is that people on either side of the aisle are picking and choosing when to use certain scenarios, certain historical points to fit their narrative. And that brings us to the two-party system. We've had this discussion off script many
Mhm.
times, where our society, our country now, we don't really fall into this black and white. There's a lot of gray. With the two-party system, once you title yourself, or once you have designated yourself as one side or the other, you're forced to either agree with everything or none at all. I don't really get to meet people who will either speak on the middle ground, or speak in agreement to the other side. Yeah, and I really want to dive deep into this, because again, shocked at some of the conversations we've had personally. And I kind of want to bring it to the masses so that they can see that, hey, we are two normal people that are living in the US. We both have our own careers. We both came from nothing and built these higher educational careers, and we're contributing to society. But we have similar but different beliefs and how we think politics should be run, as well as how this society should be ran. And so that deep dive hopefully will allow the audience to see that we can still come together if we, honestly, if we get rid of the news and we get rid of politicians, which is kind of weird, because that's the only way our country moves forward, is if we have those two things.
To the point about the two-party system, one of the most frustrating aspects of this in the day and age of information technology, and where you can pull out your phone and find a talking head on Fox or a talking head on MSNBC, or your own YouTube channel with political commentary, the people I feel that are the most disgruntled are sometimes the people that are on the far sides, far left, far right. And sometimes those individuals are the loudest people. People like me, people like you that kind of end up more moderate in some of our thinking, we don't go out and speak on it. We have our beliefs that might be a little left, might be a little right, might be right down the middle, but it's not in my best interest, nor do I have the need to go out and share my political ideology. But what you end up getting is people on the fringes that are outspoken, that are going to rallies, that have their YouTube channels. They're usually on the farther side, and that's how they get their viewership. You're listening to somebody, and they will identify, check every single box of their party and then some. Most Americans probably fall somewhere in the middle. But when you have very divisive conversation where you're drawing that line in the middle, and that's what you're hearing, and that's what the support is, and then you have your friends or family or peers sharing those things on social media or reposting pictures or reposting video, before you know it, you get into that identity politics of, I identify as a Democrat, I identify as a Republican, therefore I also agree with all these other things. I feel like most people don't even know everything that their party stands for, and that's where we fall into like this very black and white divisiveness.
You mentioned seeing this on social media, on Facebook, on Instagram, TikTok. Do you personally have you had personal conversations with people in real life about things going on, like in politics and the economy? Like, is that
No,
something you have? Yeah, I don't either. And that's
no.
the weird thing, is that why are we just not interesting enough or educated enough on these topics, and that's why we don't have these conversations with other people? Or are we to a time and stage in our society where we just feel so afraid to speak about those things because of how polarizing it has become? I mean, just when we go down every single topic, the powers above, whoever, it's usually politicians and it's usually the news, they try to siphon it out where it's just black and white. Like,
Yeah.
someone can agree that we have the Second Amendment, and you have your guns, to bear right to bear arms, but we can also agree that we probably need some gun reform, right? Because I think you own a gun, Nick.
Yeah, I own
I
several.
My household, we own a gun,
Mhm.
but I am definitely for gun reform. I feel like guns, in the capacity that we're allowing people to obtain them now, probably a little too easy. I mean,
Mhm.
and then also the types of guns that we're utilizing. Like, why do we need to have some of these guns that are firing so quickly, and just the capacity that we don't need it for self defense, not in this state and age. But I know there are some people out there who say, well, what if the army comes for us? But that is such far out there. If we were to prepare for the worst case scenario in every situation in our life, it would be terrible.
I don't disagree with you on that front. And to go back to your first statement, we can go back to guns, but it's hard for me at least to want to engage in political talk with people because of how divisive and kind of one-sided individuals can be. This is one thing that law school teaches you. They brainwash you for 3 years on how to think differently. You have to be able,
Brainwashed to be a liberal, right?
yeah, right? No. No, I would say that law school, the main job is to teach you how to argue both sides,
Mhm.
because you don't know where you're going to end up, on what side of the argument you're going to be. And a good lawyer understands the ability to recognize and almost predict, forecast what opposing counsel's arguments are going to be. So I would say that anytime I'm going into negotiation, when I was actually working in family law, any other instance of law practice for me, I'm always trying to say, okay, what could the other person say? What is their strongest argument? Let me go and research what is the position that they're going to have. That way I can either recognize a good argument or be prepared for a counter argument. And that's what law school teaches you. Now, what you do with that is your own. But I fall into that gray area where I can appreciate a good political conversation. I can appreciate a good back and forth that's based in evidence and logic and respectful discussion. But I feel like in this day and age, people can't really do that. So the individuals I feel comfortable having those conversations with, like my wife, I will have a conversation with my wife. Or if I know, based on speech that the other person has given, either maybe you're out at lunch or you're at the bar and they drop a nugget where you're like, oh, okay, we might have a similar ideology here, then I feel safe to cross that line. But I'm also okay because I've educated myself enough to understand and recognize the other side, that if somebody with an opposing view wants to have that discussion, I can play on that ground too without being offensive, without ruining a relationship. One of my worries with peers and friends and family is I don't want to talk politics because I don't want to harm the relationship. My relationship with individuals goes a lot deeper than my political ideology. Those people are important to me. You are my friend because I see value in our friendship and the support you've given me or my family over the years. And your political ideology isn't going to change the fact that I respect and I care and I love you. Like that's just my friendships and my family. And I get worried that the friends on the other side may not feel the same way. And so I don't want to ruin a friendship. I don't want, why? Because I want to voice my opinion about politics? No, the friendship is worth a lot more than that. And I'm not going to judge somebody based on their politics
Mhm.
because everybody is in their own situation. Everybody has their own stuff that they're dealing with. Everybody votes or identifies with something for their own reasons. And so that's kind of why I sit back from the political discussion and kind of disengage when it happens. But I have no problem having a talk that's respectful and engaging and informative. I'm always out there to learn. I'm always out there to understand.
I agree. I mean, I think that not even confrontation, but just bringing up that topic, it can be tough. But I feel like I approach it a little differently. If I feel comfortable enough with you and I want to test our friendship, I do bring it up. I will send you memes about politics, and that's probably when you know that I am trying to test how strong our relationship is. Because if your friendship is not able to sustain a conversation about a simple topic like gun rights, gay marriage, abortion. Like if we can't have a conversation casually and not get heated and not start throwing words at each other, like we can have a productive conversation, then that says a lot. Like maybe it wasn't a friendship that should have been there in the first place. Luckily, I would say 95% of the friends that I have reached out to, whether I've, kind of sent a meme to them and we've had a brief discussion about the political meaning behind that meme, has always ended up well, whether we agreed with it or disagreed with it. Yeah. And like you said, everything that we vote for or we go to work for, it's all based on our lived experiences. We all have grown up in a different environment. We grew up with a different family built, a different family dynamic. And so that cultivates the belief system that we have.
Yeah.
And that's why I keep in mind that no matter who disagrees with me, why are they disagreeing? It's because they are putting a different priority on a different topic than them. Maybe my priorities are less economic, more social. Maybe yours is more economic, less social. Maybe you grew up with guns and loved hunting, and that brings back a lot of good memories. So maybe gun control is more important. And that's the thing. I think we all want the same thing. Our priorities just are on a different level, and therefore we fight differently for those different topics.
So I'm going to press on you here with
Yeah.
what you said, because you said that you want to test your friendship. Do you believe that your political ideology and your approach has evolved or changed throughout your life at any point?
I don't necessarily think it has. Well, yes, no, it has changed because I grew up very poor.
Mhm.
And healthcare was lacking. I mean, the fact that we didn't have access as well, we didn't have very much money. And so as I was growing up, I was focusing on how do I make a lot of money, keep the money, less taxes? Like, how do
Yeah.
I maintain that so that our family unit can survive in the US? But now that I have obtained that sustainability, financial sustainability, I make good enough money. Yes, I have student debt, but that is beyond what I need to. I'm very much privileged now. I've gone from low income to middle, high middle, if not
Mhm.
even in the top tier of
Yeah.
income for doctors. And so my priorities have changed. It has shifted less to economics. I don't mind paying a little bit more taxes if it means the money goes to the right place. And that's the issue we have with our government is that we sometimes don't know where it goes, or majority of the time it goes to places we don't necessarily want it to go. And so it has now shifted more to social aspects. The social stuff is more important to me, especially being a gay man and a gay doctor in this world where being unique or being not heterosexual is still looked down upon. We still looked lesser than. We have two kids, one through surrogacy, one through adoption. And before we even started that surrogacy and adoption process, we tried to go through the foster system in two different states. And let me tell you, even as a doctor, we struggled. We had so many barriers, so many walls that were put up and discriminated against us. Like some of the stories that we could tell you, it's terrible what we've gone through. And it's just because we're gay. They didn't even
Yeah.
care that I was a doctor. They didn't care that I had a good income, that we had a stable relationship. We were just discriminated based on the fact that we were two guys trying to have a kid. That's why when we have these political discussions, abortion is a big thing. Gay marriage is a big thing for me. And then people try to use kids and adoption as a reason to do one way or another. It's just it's so frustrating sometimes.
And again, that's your experience, right?
Yep, absolutely.
But the reason I asked about the evolution, because I'm going to go back to what you were saying. If 21-year-old Long was friends with 36-year-old Dr. Long, and you guys sat down for a political discussion and you tested your relationship with the older version of you, Dr. Long, you would vehemently disagree with some of the instances, at least from an economic standpoint, of how to manage money, right? That'd be fair
No,
to say, based on what you're saying.
no. The way we manage money is still the same. I'm still frugal as hell.
Well, let me
But
rephrase that from a point of protecting your money as opposed to trying to give it to as many people as possible,
sure, yeah,
right? So let's clarify that. So in that nature, what I'm hearing you say is that you would be okay with testing that relationship and saying, "Hey, no, you're completely wrong. We can get into it about that. If even if we got into the biggest fight over it, maybe this is a relationship that's not worth having." Even though 15, 16, 17 years later, that is you. That is what you agree to. So at that point, are you picking up the phone and going back to that individual and saying, "Sorry, I actually agree with you. I just got there a little bit later in life to agree with you."
of course, I am not one to shy away to admitting that I'm wrong or apologizing. We've had this discussion when I talk to patients. If I don't
And I want to
know,
clarify, you're not wrong. That's just your experience, your worldly experience. I want to be very clear. There's no right or wrong here. So
correct.
even with that, I want to correct you on, you weren't wrong at 21. You're not wrong at 36.
Right. But admitting that there was growth to be had and that life changes and therefore your priorities change. Absolutely. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but back in college, we all lived together in an apartment, four of us. And I remember and I think back now and how silly that conversation was, but I got so mad about the electric bill. I don't know if you remember that conversation, but sometimes I think, why was I that like stingy? Why? But it's because didn't have any money. Everything that I had was based on student loans. I was taking everything out in debt. Not to say that you guys didn't have that same experience, but your priorities were a little different. Again,
Mhm.
we had the dispute, we discussed it, we argued, whatever, but we were still friends. And that's what
Yep.
I'm trying to say with politics is the same thing. We can disagree, but there is one day where we'll see eye to eye again. And it's hanging on long enough to see that eye to eye, to see that growth, but also to keep trying to find the commonality.
And I press Sonia there because it's important to define the fact that like you would come back around and recognize the fact that there was some discord and maybe it was handled one way or the other. That's my fear with political discussions now is that you identify, you're set in a box based on the other person's perception, and then you lose that relationship. And then people are so prideful, people are so egotistical that it never comes back around, like, especially in this day and age. I feel like people don't care enough after something so divisive has been said that it's, no, sorry, you're out of my life. And you see it all the time. I hate these types of people, but it's like, if you disagree with me, you just need to unfollow me and unfriend me. That main character syndrome runs rampant in our country. Everybody is the main character of their own show. And so, yeah, we're all living our own lives, but I sometimes want to look at people like, you're not that important. You're a small microcosm in a vast universe of things and moving pieces and people. There's 8 billion people on the planet. You're one of 8 billion. So that's a lot of people. But everybody approaches life that they are the main character, that their opinion should matter, that what they want out of it is what they should get. And maybe it's tied to the American dream, but it's frustrating when you see those approaches because it's like, no, there's other ways to view things. There's other ways to look at things. And to the point that we've been trying to make, everybody comes from their own unique experience. So
Right. Right. So how do you feel your past or your upbringing has shaped your political views and how you live life and go through life and vote and et cetera?
yeah, again, experience, right? So my mom, as we've talked about, both of our parents, but like my mom is an immigrant. She came from Colombia, South America when she was a kid. Her family immigrated here. So half my family is Hispanic. Half my family, you can say, is minority. Obviously, I look pretty damn white. My dad is Polish and German, even with a little Irish thrown in there. And we grew up in Chicago. I grew up Catholic, still am Catholic. I have my own opinions about Catholicism that we don't have enough time to go into today, but primarily grew up in a very blue household. And the blue household came from my mother because she was the breadwinner. My dad's a blue collar guy, which nothing wrong with that. A lot of hard work on his side, but he didn't care enough about politics. He had bigger things to worry about. But my mom, she wears the pants in that relationship because my dad is just very easygoing and he chills. He just enjoys life. But you have that influence. So it starts with your parents and the location that you're born in, and a lot of times, at least in this day and age, religion. And then we moved to Texas, which is a red state. We're in Fort Worth, which is in Tarrant County, which is one of the most conservative counties in the entire country. And then you start getting the dynamics of, as you're growing up in school, you start having friends, and those friends have parents, and those parents have political affiliations or opinions. And that's how you start trying to determine what your ideas are, what your ideology is. We can all agree that at one point in time, we joined a group of friends and started doing things because that group of friends thought things were cool and you wanted to be cool. And so you tried to mirror that, you try to match that, you try to do the things that that group was doing. And then we go off to the University of Texas, which is one of the most liberal universities in Texas, right there in the People's Republic of Austin. So you have those experiences where now you got 50,000 people that are from all over the world, and you're engaging in debate and conversation, and then things change there. Again, we've talked about this before. It's chapters. So for me, it was like every single big chapter influenced. Then I end up going to law school, and that's a different chapter. And I get my degree from Texas A&M, so one of the most conservative, universities in the state. And now I'm out practicing, and it's just my way of thinking politically has always been not necessarily influenced by the people I've been around, but I've been willing to have the conversations to understand where people are coming from. I want to know, I want to learn. Why is it you feel the way that you feel? And then applying that to my experiences in life and see if that's something that I want to take on myself or something I may disagree or agree with, if that makes sense.
It makes sense, and I'm actually a little shocked that you said that your mom. And I know she's probably going to be listening in on this episode, but
Probably.
I'm a little shocked that you're saying that you grew up kind of in a little blue bubble. I would have thought you grew up a little bit more because Catholicism, maybe a little bit more conservative, a little bit more red. Hearing you say that kind of blows my mind because I think back to my own upbringing, and it's the opposite. My parents were very much traditional, very conservative. In fact, voting pattern, they have completely voted opposite of what I have voted over the last several elections. And I've actually had more intense debates with my dad, but I think in that situation, it's more of I actually want to win because he's always won. Like he's always told me what to do, but that's a different relationship, a different dynamic. But it's interesting that you can talk to these different peoples and they may or may not have the same viewpoints as their upbringing or their families do. And then I would be curious to see why and how, what causes that flip. In my life, obviously, I know the reason my parents vote more conservative is because they are coming from communist Vietnam. They came here with no money. So their focus isn't more social stuff. Even though as a family, our family has utilized social welfare, not necessarily handouts, but social welfares when we need it. And that's what allowed them to then send their kids to college. And so I can see that our upbringing was uplifted by those programs. And so when I hear about one side or the other trying to cut those programs, and then my family members who then agree with it, I'm sitting there like, you literally used that to get to where you're at now, but you're going to cut it because you no longer need it. And it's very frustrating. But with that said, you keep talking about how law school shaped you. I absolutely agree with that. Like our higher education has done a lot of people say it liberalizes us, but for me, it has allowed me to be more open minded because on a daily basis, we see patients, we see clients that are not in the same viewpoints, right? And we have to maintain a cordial, good relationship. And in my field, I actually want to build a very close relationship because the closer that I feel with you and my patients feel with me, the better that treatment plan will be, the better that your health will be. And so I don't care if my patient comes in and they're wearing a MAGA hat or they come in with a rainbow flag on their shirt. My goal isn't to decide whether or not their political views are right. My goal is to lay out just the medicine. As we go through medical school, our goal isn't to pick right or wrong. Our goal is to learn the knowledge and then put the data out there for the patients to help decide and choose. I try to do the same when it comes to these sort of discussions. I'm not trying to win the fight unless you're my dad. I want to win the fight. But if it's just you and me, I want to lay out my knowledge on the topic, and then I want to hear what your data is on the topic, and then we decide what's right, what's wrong, what's real, what's not, and then come to a final decision, or come to a consensus or an idea that maybe we'll agree, that middle ground, like I said.
And to that point, like I can be swayed. That's the thing. I'm a lawyer. You give me a good argument, you give me a good sound argument, I can be swayed to go either way. And so to go back to like my mom, for instance, you draw a good point. My mom was, she's probably gonna hate me for this, but like she still, I believe, votes blue. Right? That's where she aligns with. That's how she grew up. And
I need to hang out
as
with
you
your
get
mom
older,
more, is what I'm hearing.
yeah. As individuals get older, like they're more set in their ways. They don't want to change. They're comfortable with what they've believed in over the last so many years. But, you look at immigration policy, well, she was an immigrant. She went through the appropriate channels to get her citizenship. However, the way that she votes is kind of against what has been established for, the blue side versus the red side. The way that she had to do it is probably more in line with what conservatives want, but she's voting kind of against that. And so it's trying to understand the dynamic of like, okay, well, what is your bigger picture? What are you valuing? Do you understand where you vote for? Mom, do you even care about immigration policy? Her response might be, absolutely not. I vote because of this, that, or the other, not because of that. Again, people want to identify others as fitting into a box, as a stereotype. You look at me, you see a white man, right? Well, I have Latino roots. I have minority roots. I have people in my family that only speak Spanish, that still live in Colombia. People are so quick to stereotype others without kind of understanding where they come from. And those dynamics interfere with the political assumptions that occur. So where you might be afraid to have the conversation with me because you see a white guy. I'm a white guy in Texas. I have been told before that I'm probably one of the most conservative guys that they'll ever meet. And that's not true. I am very moderate. To some instance, I'm more libertarian, where I take the approach of like, let everybody do what they want to do, as long as, and this might also be kind of controversial, but as long as they're not hurting anybody else or hurting themselves, and to that point, if they are hurting themselves, I still kind of like don't care. Everybody's accountable for their own actions. But as long as you're not hurting others and I don't have to pay for it, I'm kind of okay with what you want to do. And then from there, I base out what my ideology is. And my ideology sits on both sides of the aisle. Both sides of the aisle. Some people, they again, identity politics. They identify with one side and they stick with everything that side has. They refuse to cross over, even if the point from the other side would benefit them, because they've already established themselves with Team Blue. They refuse to acknowledge anything from Team Red, and vice versa.
Why do you feel that way? Because when we were growing up, we always wanted to, do I want to say that we wanted to stand out or be the standout, but now we're all trying to like fit in. Is that kind of what you're feeling? Like, what? Because you're right. Like, why do people siphon themselves into one way or another? Like, why can't we say, again, it's a two-party system that's definitely forcing some of this, but why can't a candidate come out there, not necessarily say that they're Democratic or Republican, and just say they are running on this platform? They want abortion, but they want certain restrictions on it. They are okay with gun rights, but they want some reform on it. They want, I don't know, Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, but maybe they are narrowing down some of the criteria. Like, why can't we just find that middle ground? And like, I feel like it would be so simple, but because politicians are just so hard on their stance and that they're not allowed to break away from that viewpoint, that they're not willing to compromise or willing to talk to each other. Everything that we're seeing on Capitol Hill, like, it's just a show. What do we actually believe? Is anything going to happen? Not much has happened.
To that point, if you look at all the third party candidates in any election, for the most part, they kind of don't stand a chance. And that's because whether you're on the blue side or the red side, it's whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, it's power. Power is power, right? So why would you want to encourage that and give up your own power? And I think back to like the State Bar of Texas. So the State Bar of Texas is the bar association that licensed lawyers in Texas. Well, lawyers write their own rules on how to be lawyers. Politicians write their own rules on how to be politicians. So when you're given that power to basically police yourself, you're going to put it in a situation where you're always going to benefit. And when you're looking at a third party candidate trying to come in, I fully believe that they're put to the wayside because you have this two-party system, and regardless of the two-party system, they want to keep the two-party system so they can keep the power. So you gotta fall on either one of those lines if you want to play the game. And that's where you get candidates that are more far left, more moderate, more far right. They still have to fall in one of those two-party systems, or at least at the top level, they're not going to have a chance. In this day and age, you're not going to have a chance to be president as an independent. You're just not, because the money is flowing in these two parties, and that's what everybody in the United States is comfortable with. And going back to your original point, people want to be accepted. I am very comfortable with myself and who I am. I don't need to justify who I am to other people. I don't need to, I'm just confident in my own skin. You're the same way. You're confident with who you are. Nothing's going to change that. In the day and age of social media and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, people want to be accepted, and they're trying to be accepted, maybe not in their immediate community, but in the sphere of influence or group that exists out in the world. And I think that's maybe part of it. People just want to be accepted. People want to belong. People want to find their group. That way they can enjoy life. It's their church. It's their focus group. It's their work. But when you start getting past that, it's your Facebook group. It's your social media sphere. It's that convention across the United States where it brings all the like-minded people together that you really want to go to because they all think alike. People just want to belong. And that's where it's easy to just kind of pick a side and run with it, because now you belong to something. You belong to a cause that might be bigger than you. People really lean into that because some people really want to feel like they're making a difference.
Yes, you have a point, but then why out of the two parties, the majority of both parties would agree more? So why can't we create that third group? And why isn't it backed more? I just don't understand. Like me and you, I feel like yes, we're moderate, but we're on the opposite side of moderate. But we can agree on a lot of things. I
Yeah.
know there are more people like us. I know there are more people like us.
Yeah.
So why aren't we able to have that movement? Yeah, I just, and that's where the conspiracy theory, like theorist side of me comes in. Like, what if the two-party system has already created this list of these are the presidents for the next 10, 20, 30 years, and they've already set and decided who it was. Trump was always going to be it. Doesn't matter. This was all for show. And so it's looking like we're fighting back and forth, but it's already pre-planned. Who knows?
Yeah, I can equate it to lawyers. You will hire a lawyer and you will go into court, and your opposing side will have their own lawyer, right? So as a client, you're like, this is my lawyer, that's the enemy. Well, what the client doesn't know is that those two lawyers were buddy in law school, and every other week they go play basketball and they go grab dinner and they go on vacation together. In the courtroom, they're advocating for the client, but they don't realize that they're just normal human beings and they're doing a job. Sometimes the phrase like it's just business, it literally is just business. And we've been in trial or hearings where we've intentionally gone to the other side because we know the lawyer personally, and we've had a very lighthearted, fun conversation in front of their client because we know it's going to put their client off the rails. I think that people don't understand just human nature to that level of, yeah, these politicians, they may fight and disagree and be on the news going at each other, but as soon as that camera's off, they might be buddy. They might be very cordial and respect each other and go out to dinner and travel together and have holidays together and spend time with each other's families. But we don't get to see that. If the population got to see that, they would start questioning like, okay, what's going on here? And with the third party, everybody who's tried has pretty much failed. So why would you leave your party if you know that you're never going to be successful? Why would you try to establish another party if you know that you're never going to be successful? It's going to take a very special individual or very divisive parties where the majority of the United States says, I'm sick and tired of this approach. I can't handle this black and white. I can't handle this identity politics. I can't handle the political violence. I can't handle this blame game that we're playing. That finally a candidate has come out and they're just a normal person. They're moderate. They have solid views. They're not trying to take anything away from anybody. They're just trying to do right by the country. And that's the problem. All politicians think that they're going to do right by the country, but they have their own agendas. They have their own agendas. They have their own influence. They have the money funneling in. So by putting yourself into a third party situation, you're kind of saying, all right, I'm probably not going to win at that. The most I can do is probably take votes away from another candidate. And even that's been used strategically in the past for elections. I would love to see a third party. It would spice things up a little bit, but it's hard to do in this day and age.
Do you think that time is now, though, because of how divisive our country is? Like, do you think maybe this next election cycle is the time that that third party might potentially be the closest that they'll ever be to coming out on top? And
I
and
wouldn't
what
say like
what sort of candidate do you think, like, I'm curious to hear what sort of candidate, what do you think that their platform, what should they run on? Like, where, if we had to run down through the list, like, where do you think they should fall? Maybe that's what we should do, is maybe we should build this resume and send it out to the universe and see if there's anyone out there that can actually fit this resume and say, "Hey, let's have you run for president in 3 years."
so I don't think that this election would be any easier than any other election in which there is going to be no repeat candidate. So here, I would assume, given Biden's health, he's not going to be running. And
Yeah.
then obviously Trump, from term limits, is not going to be able to run again. There's a lot of fear mongering that goes on either side, and fear mongering really attaches it to uneducated individuals or too smart of individuals to where they're so smart that they're a little bit crazy and a little bit conspiracy theorists. But the fear mongering then gets, as we said, more outspoken because the far left, far right, those are kind of the loudest voices. So you'd have to find someone that the middle ground of America could sit back and say, all right, I'm really done with being blamed because I'm part of this party, and I'm done blaming too. Like, there's an accountability there. You have to say, I'm tired of trying to find the victim and the assailant in every single one of these situations. And I just want to come to terms with what's best for our country as a whole.
Mhm.
And the sad thing about it is, we run, obviously there's the electoral college, but when you look at who our politicians are, we're looking primarily, if you're going to break it down, it's like, who's the majority? Like, find the majority is going to win with what the majority wants. And I think people forget that. Like, the majority kind of runs the way things are done. You might be in a room with 100 people, and 49 people in that room are on the same page, 51 are on that same page. Like, there are a lot of people that think that what you believe is not in their best interest, but you got to find those common ground as to what that third party should be. And maybe it's a little bit more moderate because we're tired of the extreme left and the extreme right. I'll be honest, I'm getting fatigue from these political riots, these political activists on either side. Like, sometimes I don't feel safe because you never know which side you're going to end up with. And mob mentality is a very dangerous thing. Mob mentality is a very dangerous thing. You have seen governments overturned from mob mentality. So I don't know. I don't know who that individual is, at least personally. And we'll go into some of my political ideology. I am very conservative in my fiscal approach, but I'm very liberal in my social approach because everybody should be entitled to live the way that they want to live their life. Again, as long as they're not hurting other people, and then as long as I'm not paying for it. And I think that when you're looking at history, I'm not afraid of going backwards. I trust in the people that are a lot more educated than me, and I trust in the voice of the people that these extremes just they won't happen. Nobody's coming to take all of your guns away. That's not going to happen. It's fear mongering. But there might be some gun reform. Understand the difference. That doesn't happen. So
Yeah.
I've been ranting. What do you want?
You have been ranting, but good rants. This is where we disagree. Is, you said we won't go backwards, but I do feel like when it comes to abortion, we have gone backwards. I know we pre-recording we talked about maybe not going down too much detail because we want to make these longer episodes on these specific topics. Just to briefly touch on abortion itself, prior to the overturn of Roe v. Wade, there was universal abortion. A better way to have approached that is, if we wanted to put more restrictions on it, we could have. Not what we ended up doing, which was the overturn, which then sent it back to the states. And everyone's like, oh, that means it went back to the people. But it really didn't. It just reverted back to the older rules and laws that were already in place in many of those states. And many of those states did not allow the current cohort of population that are living in those states to reaffirm or re-vote on it. And therefore, it has maintained that conservative restriction on abortion. If we want to send things back to the people, send back to the states, we should actually do it. So after Roe v. Wade was overturned, what should have done is every single state should have held an election to allow all their people to vote for or against certain restrictions. Again, overwhelmingly, even in very red states, most people agree that abortion to a certain stage is needed and should be allowed for the safety of the mother as well as the safety of the pregnancy and the baby. Because of course, I don't agree. And I mean, again, fear mongering of late term abortions. I don't agree with that. I can't imagine any doctor going out there and saying, "Oh, we're going to pull a baby that is 36 weeks along. We're just going to like that is not even abortion. That's considered murder at that point. No one's doing that. The only time that those sort of very rare instances occur is when someone is about to die, whether that is the actual baby or the pregnancy is going to end or the mother's life is at stakes. There are these nuances and the data is out there to show it, but I don't know why the other side refuses to agree with that. If we flip the switch and we go on other topics, it's the same thing. The right may be correct in some of their data, and then the left will turn a blind eye and not discuss or trust that data. So it's really frustrating. I just disagreed with the fact that you said we can't go backwards. I do feel like we can, and that's where we have to tread lightly. There are a lot of things that we have right currently in the country, but we just need to tweak and kind of narrow or put on those guardrails. It's just like kids, right? As our kids grow up, we can allow more and more rules, but we always have those guardrails there to make sure that they grow up to be functioning people in society.
Well, let's stay on abortion really fast, at least from the makeup of the decision and all that. The Supreme Court didn't come out and say abortion is illegal. There's not a federal ban on abortion. And I know that it's been discussed that is something in which, again, you're getting into the voice of the people and what happens. In your own position, or at least in your own argument, if a federal ban is then being discussed, if a majority of the people in the United States want the federal ban put through, then that's the voice of the people. That is the voting of the people. So with the Supreme Court kicking it down to the states, we do that a lot. A lot of, it's in our Constitution that there are a lot of laws that are reserved to the states. And the reason why is because each state is demographically different. Each state is geographically different. Each state has its own culture. And if you equate that to, let's say, Europe is broken up many different countries, many different cultures, many different languages. They all have their different approaches. The same thing exists here. If I'm in Louisiana, it's going to be different than being in California. And I've been all over the country. I've seen a lot of different people and I've seen a lot of different cultures. What may work in one setting may not work for another setting. And so I think the ability for states to choose themselves and for those people to determine what's important for them is very important. You should not have, let's say, you look at a farm state, you shouldn't have somebody in a state that doesn't have any farming making policy decisions for a state that has farming, because they're not farmers. They don't understand. So you can make that application to abortion in the sense of, well, maybe this state is very, very religious. And again, I don't like incorporating religion into politics. They should be separate. But if that's what the state wants, then okay, then that's what they can vote for. They can put forth the politicians to make those changes. You can enact the change. But then again, you get stuck into the identity politics where you may agree with abortion being legal, but because you identify as a Republican and you vote Republican, you're kind of stuck in the, all right, well, I really want abortion to be legal, but is it really going to impact me? No, but you know what? Voting for this candidate because they're going to lower my tax rate, that's what's really going to impact me. And so it's just the nature of that region. And when it comes to the nature of the region, it's a little bit of accountability. If you don't like it, move. If I don't like Texas and I don't like the people and I don't like the politics, I'm not going to stay in Texas. Now, that's easy for me to say as somebody who is seemingly successful, who has money, who can make the move. I completely understand that. But I'm also one who I've worked really hard to get where I am in life. So it's let's find a way to get there. I will find a way. And I think that's my work ethic. I will always find a way to accomplish what I want to do. Not a lot of people have that work. So they'll sit and they will be in a situation that doesn't benefit them and they'll just live with it. And then they'll complain about it and they'll complain about it. They won't even go vote. They'll just keep complaining about it. And then you kind of hit a point of just, I'm content. I'm not going to do anything. Nothing's ever going to change. And then you're apathetic to the political system, and that doesn't help any change. Under some circumstances, the region, the state, that group of people should be able to determine what's best for them, as opposed to trying to make it a determination of what's best for somebody in another state. Because I think that's where some divisiveness comes from. And then you just appreciate the culture of what state you're in.
And I agree. But that's what I'm saying is that a lot of what the law, when it got punted back to the states, a lot of the laws that are being held at standard right now
Mhm.
are laws from 30, 40 years ago when it was very, very conservative, right? So there were some
Yeah.
states, like I think it was Nebraska or Ohio, that they were allowed to re-vote on abortion rights. And even though they were a red state, they actually approved it and allowed it. But not every state did that. Wisconsin did not do that. Wisconsin still has a very outdated abort. So what I'm saying is that if we are going to send it back to the states, then we should immediately allow the people to speak. And we have not done that for several, if not many of the states in the US. And
But
that goes for all
what if the
topics.
people
It's not
don't care?
we
Yeah.
don't know until
But
we
what if the people
actually
don't care?
we don't know until we actually allow people to vote. That's the thing is we will find out if people don't care on ballot day, on voting day. But we're not even giving them the
But it
opportunity to show.
But the opportunity, because each state is different, right? Each state has its own constitution. I
Yes.
don't know if a lot of you guys know this, but there's a United States Constitution, and then each state has their own constitution. There are protocols for how those things should happen, because you also don't want situations where it's like every Tuesday we're voting on another topic via the state. So the process may not have occurred right then and there, but the process can be put forth through a ballot initiative or somebody else in the next election cycle. So you see general election cycles, it's like every 2 years or so. Even though you might sit back and say, well, they didn't re-vote on it. Well, is there something that's being pressed forward in the future to then revisit it in 2026 or 2028? Again, it's what are the people doing in that state? If the people in your state really want to voice their opinion, have the vote, well, then what's being done? Are people petitioning? Are people voting those elected officials into office to make that change? Are candidates running on that platform? How are we as a people making the change? How are we as a people trying to influence what we want? And if you're the one person out of 10 people in the room that want that, well, sorry, it's just not in the interest of the majority, which is me going back to the majority. I don't disagree with you on the sense of, okay, it would have been nice for every state to say, hey, we're just going to automatically revote on this issue. I think that's a very beneficial thing to do. I am not disagreeing with you. I'm just making the statement of, from the political protocols that exist, we have to run political protocols, or else we're revoting on everything the Supreme Court comes out with. And that can be a very, very chaotic way of running your politics. I'm not saying our political system's perfect either.
Right, right. I mean, we're full of inefficiencies. I don't know what Doge did, but didn't
Yeah,
make everything
yes,
more
we are.
efficient. But you were talking about we, I do think it's a little unfair to say that people can just move because you pointed it out. We are very much privileged. Like me,
Yeah.
doctor, you, lawyer, we can say those things because we can do it. But I know
Uh-huh.
that there are families, friends that don't have the capability. And whether that's finances, whether it's the bandwidth, or maybe their circle is there and they just can't move, even though they disagree with the area, but their family has set roots there and they can't leave. Maybe their business is there. They can't just uproot that. So I wish that we lived in a world where we all could live peacefully. And we used to have that, and now it's not. And I want to get back to that. And I don't know how to get back to that. And that's where I wanted this conversation to happen because we have not yelled at each other. We obviously have some opposing views on certain things, but we're still going to be friendly after this. We're still going to be jabbing each other,
Yeah.
having banter against each other, calling each other, whatever, who knows what. And we're still going to be sending texts and memes and calling each other on holidays. Like that doesn't change anything. And now that I know how you vote, you know how I vote, and not only that, but we know our viewpoints. It only makes me feel closer to you. Now I can have even more in-depth conversations because we've done so well so far.
I wanna press on you. I don't think we have an end goal that's different. People miss the end goal. They can't see the forest from the trees. We are both agreeing in theory to something. We're just having a little bit of a disagreement as to the process of how to get there.
Get there.
To your point with gun reform, yes, I live in a red state. Do I believe the government's going to come and take my guns? Absolutely not. The people, in quotes, the people won't let that happen. But I do believe there needs to be some gun reform, because when I got my first gun from my father, it was, okay, this isn't a toy. We're going to learn how to use it. and things are going to be locked up, and we're going to practice, and we are going to learn gun rules, gun safety rules, and this is how we are going to act around firearms. There are people that don't do that. So I think there is some gun reform necessary, and it's just to what level is that gun reform going to? But I want to go back to kind of the just get up and move. How did your parents come to the United States?
They
What was
were
their situation like?
they were literally fighting for their lives and thrown on a boat who they had no idea where the destination was. They didn't know if they were going to have enough food on the boat. Completely different situation, right? We are again in a privileged situation where
But it's not. It's not a completely different situation, because the way that some political individuals set the standard is that you have people that say, I want to flee the United States. This is a horrible place to be. I hate the way it's racist, it's sexist, it's fascist, and then it's too liberal, it's too left. You have all these things that is seemingly making it a life-threatening situation. So is it really not that bad? Because it's not communist Vietnam where you're actually throwing yourself on a boat to escape real atrocities. So that's where I get to the accountability. I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but I want to say you can always find a way. Your parents found a way. It's just at what point does a situation become so dire that you physically need to escape for your lives or your
right,
family? So
and I
sorry.
think that
Go
that
ahead.
is the
I
one
apologize.
thing. No, and I think that you're right. Good point. But that is the one thing that I do still love about America is that even our weakest, our poorest people have some sort of help, whether that's from community, whether that's from government assistance, some sort of, we may some of us may not feel like it's enough. Some people may feel like it's too much, but at a minimum that we do have some of that. Now, our unhoused population, homeless population, we can do better with that. I think our veterans, we can do better with that. And that both sides of the aisles agree that we need to do better. And yet, for some reason, we can't agree. But again, your situation back when my parents were fleeing Vietnam, it was literally for their lives. Here, I don't agree with abortion, or I do agree with abortion, but it's not going to like kill me at the end of the day. Therefore, I'm not going to move. Or
Well, that's some of the debate. If as a mother, is the mother's life being threatened? Depending on how you define a fetus as a fetus versus a human versus a clump of cells, you're still talking to some people about life and death. So for the standpoint of trying to get an abortion, where is that line drawn? Where
Mhm.
where are you then escaping to another state to seemingly protect your life, or depending on your political view, ending the life of another? So that's just where I'm like, okay, well, you got to find the way to, if Long's parents can do it, how come we can't be accountable enough to ourselves to find a similar path? Sorry, I keep interrupting you. I apologize,
No,
Long.
you're okay.
I'm
And
just
I
trying to
think,
make points as they come.
yes, accountability. And I think people do find ways, but I think that that's where, when you're that desperate, you find ways that are not necessarily the best or the healthiest way for you and your
Sure.
family, as well as the people around you. And that's where I worry is that why do we have to create these scenarios where people have to be so desperate for their lives to make change, I don't agree with that. So, but again, I have the privilege to speak on those social changes because I live in a time where money isn't as big of a concern nowadays for me, and so I want to focus in on those social changes more. But then, as we've talked about pre recording this, what we say and put out into the public and to the universe can come back and bite us, right? Everything that we say now, someone can take it the wrong way. They can send it up the chain to my job, my employer. They can send it up to you. Well, I guess you're your own employer, you're your own boss. So unless you're going to fire yourself, don't have any issues, but it will get back. And so we're always not necessarily censoring ourselves, but we're trying to find the right words because, again, I don't think we're here to try to polarize or scapegoat anyone. I think we're truly trying to find how we can come back together and as opposing views, as opposing as they are, find that common ground and really continue to have this conversation about any topic moving forward, really.
Yeah, and that goes, I think, to the identity politics that people like to play. I've voted blue and I've voted red, and I base my decisions in my voting on, first and foremost, how it impacts me and my family, and then I extend out from there. And to the point that I'm trying to make, I don't ever want to be persecuted for my ideas, and I want to engage in civil discussion and cordial debate. I think that's very important because you need to put ideas out into the world and test those ideas against what's appropriate. and that helps us evolve. But for instance, like when it comes down to it, for the longest time, like I didn't see abortion as something that impacted me. Like I was like, okay, this is something that I can't really relate to. I understand the pros and cons, but like I'd rather vote for my money or for gay marriage. It's like, well, gay marriage will, in my opinion, it was like it'll sort itself out. I'm not gay and I don't have friends who are gay, so I don't have to worry about it. But then we have you come out and it's like, okay, that changes because you are a close friend, practically family. So now my opinion about that changes a little bit. But then I also have situationally long, you may think that, your marriage is at risk based on what you're seeing, what you're researching. I sit back and my opinion is at one point in our history, interracial marriage was illegal and immoral and not allowed. Well, we haven't gone back to that. So socially, we keep evolving. So I'm not in fear that you are not going to be able to be married, but you might be. And so that's kind of how I base some of my ideology behind like, okay, am I really afraid that this is going to happen? No, I'm not. So I don't have to worry about voting on that topic because that topic will just sort itself out. But what I am worried on is A, B, and C because that directly impacts me or my wife or my best friend or my parents or my future daughter. And things will evolve. My take on abortion or gun rights or immigration might change as my daughter is growing and growing and growing. And so that's something where I might revisit it from a political position where a candidate in 16 years, I might be more akin to vote for them in 16 years than I would now based on how their platform is going to impact my little girl and so on and so
Mhm.
forth.
Mhm. And I agree with you. I mean,
So,
historically, you're right. Things have not been taken away, but that's where it has changed in the last 6 to 8 years, right? Something that has been in precedent, again, abortion. We keep bringing that up, but that's kind of at the forefront. That had been around for 50 years, and we were basically reversing it. And I know that in your viewpoint, it didn't get removed, it didn't get restricted, but in my view, it did get restricted because it reverted back to those old rules when it got sent back to the states. And so, if we were to think the same for gay marriage, it could also be sent back to the states. And guess what? The states would not allow it. And so, that just opens up a can of worms. And that's where I worry is that if they've already done this for one thing that has been around for 50 years, gay marriage has only been around for 11 or 12 years. So that's even easier to change. But yeah, again, that's a great topic. I
but
don't really want to get into it right now.
do you think that the majority of people in the United States would be opposed to gay marriage? Like, do you think that 51% would be like, thank the Lord, no more gays? Like, do you think that that's honestly what would happen?
I do not, but
Like,
that's what I'm
and
saying.
this is me just asking you as a, are you
And
genuinely afraid that that would happen?
I am genuinely afraid, but it's not because I don't believe that my community would not support me. It's because of the administration and the Supreme Court makeup at this current time, right? Because again, the data out there, statistics show that majority of people actually agree that abortion should be allowed to a certain time and age, certain stage. And yet it was the Supreme Court did something different from what the majority wanted. And so the Supreme Court still has the ability to do something different from what maybe the majority agrees with for gay marriage as well as any sort of other topic is that even though the majority of the population, I mean, but that also goes down to like electoral college, right? One candidate can win the popular vote, but then lose the electoral
Mhm.
college. So it's kind of that same scenario where we have elected these people in. They were supposed to represent us, but sometimes those representation changes or no longer aligns, and there's no way for us to remove them until the next election cycle. But the damage has
Mhm.
already or will already have been done. And so that's, of course, something that I will always worry about. Of course, we have contingency plans, but again, I have that privilege to have contingency plans. But I think of my fellow
Yeah.
Americans, and I don't really want everyone to have to focus in on that. Like the one thing we should all be focusing on is bettering our lives, staying healthy, and building a happy, healthy community. Like as if we can focus in on that small core group of ours, it only spreads. If every single group focus in on happiness and healthiness in their core group, it's going to spread across the country. And then our country would then be the happiest and healthiest. And we're not there. I feel like we're constantly worrying about other people's families for some reason. We're always butting everyone, myself included, myself included.
It's the main character syndrome. We're the main character and we think that our voice should be the loudest and we want to dictate, and I'm not saying you and me specifically,
Yeah.
but us as a people, we want to dictate how other people live. Like that's the brass tacks, and that's not acceptable. And again, it goes to like the states being able to vote on certain things and the federal government getting involved. Like there's so many nuances. And sadly, and I'm not trying to put my conspiracy theory hat on, like, but you need something that brings the nation back together. And sadly, it's probably going to end up being a geopolitical issue, some sort of war. It's sad. It's like war is that one thing. Like the
Yeah, I
enemy
hope
right
you're
now
wrong,
is the
but
opposing
I think you're
political
right.
side. I hope
Mhm.
I'm wrong too. But like you look at in our lifetime, we were a little bit too young for like Desert Storm. We were just kids, but we were impacted by September 11th. And what happened after September 11th was the entire country coming together in support. Now, years later, when you look at how things actually occurred with Afghanistan and Iraq, then you get into like okay, was everything on the up and up? But from a community perspective, it brought our country together.
Mhm.
And sadly, I think it's going to take something like that to bring us back together, to find a common goal, a common enemy to focus on, and realize like we're all in this together. Like the United States of America is one of the greatest countries when we come together and we work as one country. And I'm hoping for that. But to your point, I don't want to see that. I don't want to see what another war looks like. I don't want to see that sort of discourse, because it's the lives that are lost and the families that are impacted and the money that's spent and just the nature of it all. I don't want to see that, especially in this day and age.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm going to end on one point only, is that I want to point out the things that I do agree on the other side. I do agree with the Maha movement of RFK Jr., but not necessarily how it has been presented or the focuses that he has put a focus on. The foundation of the Maha movement, which is to make a healthier America, is great. I mean, that sounds amazing. Let's focus in on less processed foods, less sweets, less sugars. Let's focus in on more healthy choices, fruits, vegetables, things that are more natural. Everyone would agree with that. But it has turned into something that has geared away. That is a lot of the topics that we have talked about, is that the foundation is good. The idea is great. It's just how we have implemented or how it has been presented to the public. Another thing is America first. That is a great idea. We should really focus in on us building our country first before we start to dip into all these other countries. But America has always been known as the one, like the great mediator. We always have a hand in everything. And so everyone looks to us for that. And again, the foundational idea of what America First is great, but the way we have implemented and the way we have pursued it is not the right way. The person that is fronting it is not necessarily the right person either. So I can agree with things on the other side. I just think that we could have done it in a better way. A lot of people believe that, but maybe not willing to say that or admit it
Yeah.
because, like you said, identity politics.
Yeah.
Anything else to
Yeah,
add, Nick?
I don't disagree with you. I know that I come across as very, conservative. I do not identify as a like Republican. I do not identify as a Democrat. As I've said, I've voted on both sides of the aisle. I've literally gone to my ballot box and I've gone down. I said Republican, Democrat, Republican, Republican, Democrat, 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 because of what I am interested in and what kind of changes I want to see. But I completely agree with you. I am also not one that is afraid. I understand the president is a figurehead. I'm not afraid of the one individual figurehead, because I also am comfortable with the fact that it's the administration. Like it is a lot of smart people coming together to make decisions. And although we lean in on the figurehead, whether it's Trump or Biden or Obama or Bush, like there are a lot of smart people behind the scenes, and you have those checks and balances where there are other opposing forces across the aisle in the Senate, in the House, that can, again, checks and balances. If we didn't have the checks and balances, if they didn't exist, things would be running rampant. So I'm not afraid of the individual. I vote for the platforms of the administration.
Sure.
And then again, I'm not afraid of certain things. You and I are probably really aligned socially. Conservatively, I think that, we probably are still aligned, but we identify on kind of like separate sides of the aisle, even though we're probably really, really aligned. We just disagree on like, how do we get there?
Yeah, exactly. But another point I disagree with is that I don't think there are checks and balances currently. I do think that a lot of people have left, the experts have left the building, and we're left with whoever the top dog is choosing to put in. But no need to drone on that. I think This was a really good conversation, though. I really do, and I hope that we continue to explore these topics in more depth, in more detail, whether that's the presidency, whether that's the abortion discussion, whether that's Maha. Like, there's just so much more, and eventually, I hope that we can bring on experts and ask them questions about those things too.
Yeah. And hopefully nobody snippets this to make us sound extremely like racist or homophobic or sexist or anything like that. That happens too. So if you guys are gonna tune in and listen to the entire thing. Long, did you have any other final thoughts? No? All
Good.
good. All right. Well, that is it for this episode of the Medico-Legal Brief, where medicine meets the law. This has been Dr. Long. This has been Lawyer Nik. We appreciate you guys tuning in. Remember to give us a follow, give us a like, give us a comment. We're on YouTube and Spotify. We're also on social media, so follow our TikTok, follow our Instagram. We'll be back next week with another interesting topic. So thank you guys and have a good day. Yes, we're doctors. Yes, we're lawyers. No, this podcast is not medical or legal advice. Do not take anything we say as a reason to perform your own heart surgery, represent yourself in court, or diagnose your neighbor's rash. This is for entertainment only. Think of it like hanging out with your smartest, wittiest friends, not a substitute for an actual appointment. If you act on anything we say without talking to your own professional, that's on you. Seriously, don't do that.